So he always used authentic references to share his teaching philosophy. Some of these verses or these concepts presenting the mastery of body are presented in what we call as the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the most classical text of yoga. So there are references that he always had in these cases. Now how did he show to people this kind of power of yoga? Well, one of the simple ways was he demonstrated how when you do yoga, many miracles are possible. Now if you take a look at this kind of a picture here, you find a young boy in a very extreme back arch, on top of which somebody is standing who is a middle-aged man who is not so light necessarily. Now you can think about it in two ways. First of all, either the boy is so strong to be able to have the weight of this man on his chest, or maybe that man made himself so light that the boy doesn't feel his weight. Either one is possible or both are possible. Now whether it is one or the other, one thing is clear. It shows that this body is very strong. There is some kind of mastery of the body. It's not something casual. Please don't try this without good insurance. It's just for show, it's not for real nowadays. Because I don't think nowadays this is possible, because we are not in the era of the great masters. So he showed to people how miracles are possible using the body like this, which are very visual demonstrations. The young boy must have been about 13 or 14 maximum, and at this time Krishnamacharya was probably in his mid-40s. So you see a very young boy on the bottom and an adult on top. So this is one way he did, and there are many other photographs like this which is available where he shows this. The other thing about yoga is yoga influences our metabolic system. And this is again something which he showed through having the ability to fast for long durations without much food, or exactly the opposite, consuming large quantities of food and not getting sick. Because yoga definitely does influence our metabolism, and this is something which he demonstrated very easily. Now, once this was demonstrated, there was also the ability to show that you could become very strong. So, as you say, he used to, there was a lot of anecdotes where some of the kings from around India would throw some challenges like stopping a carriage, a horse carriage, or things like that. It was very common in those days. These were all demonstrated through the power of yoga and its practices. But another fascinating thing was the ability to change the electrical conduction of the body. See, after all, a body is an electrical conductor. If you put a finger into that plug point, you're going to get a shock. Why? Because the electricity passes through the body. There is some kind of a conduction that happens. Now, there are so many stories where you hear people connecting wires to different yogis, not just him, but different yogis of this time, where they will do certain kinds of pranayama techniques, and the electrical conduction of the body would change, because when the bulb which would be glowing would stop, or something like this was demonstrated. So that also shows how you can change the nature of the body as well. Most remarkable among all of this was he showed to people the ability to stop the heartbeat. Well, very often this kind of a miracle is possible by all of us, but we can only do it once. We can only do it once. So it's nothing special to stop the heartbeat. All of us can do it. But how about doing it twice at least? No? How about at least doing it twice? Actually, there are more than one occasion where Krishnamacharya would show the ability to stop the heartbeat. As you see, there are two different documents that record this. The one on my right here, I think it's my right, yes, there, is a letter or documenting this by a French doctor called Theros Bros, a lady doctor who did this experiment on him. Whereas on the right side you have another one in 1938 where this is again documented by two doctors in the city of Hyderabad. Actually, the place is different, the year is different. That was in 1936, that was in 1938. So you could see that this was a remarkable thing that was opening the eyes of the public. Imagine if you could do something like that and come out alive and say, okay, you know what, this is what is the power of yoga. How many of you would not want to sign up for something like that? So this is how we had to start to educate people about the value of power of yoga. That's why the word started to spread around that, well, there was somebody like this who was showing all these kind of things, reviving these ancient practices, etc. So this is something which opened the doors of the second era in his life. In the late 1920s, in sometime in 1920s, toward the later part of the 1920s, there was a Maharaja of Mysore, a South Indian state, visited Varanasi and met Krishnamacharya and said, you know what, I've heard so much about you, why don't you come down to Mysore and start a yoga school? So the previous era that I talked to was even before he went to Mysore, and this era was, okay, you come to Mysore, you start a center, I will fund this center. This was the birth of the very famous Yoga Shala of Mysore that was hosted in what is called the Jagan Mohan Palace. The palace is still existing, but not the school. So here he found a patron in the Mysore king, and he accepted to go there. And this, when the king said, look, I want you to start a school for children. Because interestingly, this king also was very much interested in what is called upholding the traditional values of the country. This has a history as well, because the great-grandfather of this king was a very remarkable cultural and spiritual philosopher who not only wanted the future generations to learn this philosophy but also benefit from it. So he started documenting many of the traditional knowledge systems of India. Today it's available in all his works of this great king who lived a couple of hundred years ago. It's documented through a series of collections called Sri Tattva Nidhi, which you can find in the Oriental Research Library in Mysore, who is publishing this work. And all of this that he documented has also one document particularly, which is one of the books is about documenting the yoga asanas that existed few hundred years ago. That's also very relevant because there are now some scholars who claim that yoga asanas were copied from Western gymnastics, which is actually some kind of nonsense. It's not a good research has never been done in these kind of claims. So in this era, so the great-grandfather was a role model for this king of Mysore, who invited Krishnamacharya and said, look, we have to teach and we have to spread this to the next generation. And the Yoga Shala was mainly meant for young children. However, it was not that this was the only teaching that Krishnamacharya did. Krishnamacharya was also teaching the king and his family and all the ministers who were adults. However, the presentation that I am going to choose to present here in this era is what he did in the Yoga Shala. It's not that he didn't do anything else, it's one of the things he did and one of the key things that he did. So early in the 1930s or just in the late 1920s, this school was formed and the students, young boys and girls, were made to join this school so that they would learn yoga and perhaps benefit from it in their lifetime as well as in future lifetime as well.